And everybody, welcome. We are at the top of the hour. I see we still have people coming in. Excuse me. So, uh, this is one of the beautiful side effects, so to speak, of what's happening in the world right now. It's bringing us all together. So we have a mix today of home users and practitioners. And we'll get into that a little more later, but this is a really beautiful mix, of course, with coMra therapy that we can all join in together. And with that, I want to hand the presentation over to Arzhan right now. Now, Arzhan is our Director of Research and Development. So he's going to do the main body of the presentation to go through this COVID and the science and these kind of things and how they relate to coMra. And then Anna, Dr. Anna Klassen, she's going to go through some aspects of things with Arzhan. And then the meeting will come back to me, and I'll go through some related aspects at the end, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So Arzhan, would you please take over the meeting now? And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Gerd. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so let me start my slides. So we live in a very interesting time, that's for sure. We've prepared together with Anna, who is sitting next to me, Dr. Anna Klassen. With Garrett and myself, presentation, we tried to pack a lot of material. So we try to squeeze it into 2 hours. Let's see how it goes. Yes, the replay will be available, and all the links, when I refer to the articles, when I have the links, it all will be available after the presentation. Well, if you don't recognize, if my English, you're not used to it, wave or say something, then I'll try to speak. I'll slow it down if my English becomes a bit. Okay. So today we will talk about, the main topic is evolving self-sufficiency, and specifically how we can do this through telemedicine with coMra therapy. This is like the main topic of our presentation today. When I look around what's happening, if I sometimes open my notebook and then look at the news, it looks like there's a whole bunch of things happening right now. So what is the nature of the current global crisis? If we talk about not the waves, the ripples on the water, but what's the undercurrent, why this is all happening. And when thinking about it, how we see it, that it's actually a crisis of self-sufficiency. If we think about the coronavirus disease, if we think about the why people get infected and then they get pneumonia and then they transition to severe stage and possibly critical stage, well, that's because our immune system is not self-sufficient. We're talking about self-sufficiency as individuals, as families, because we're sitting at home, we're running out of food, eventually we're out if we sit at home. We're talking about self-sufficiency as whole regions and as a whole countries, actually, when the airplanes are not flying, the trains are not moving the goods around. So it's actually a crisis of self-sufficiency when individually and as a whole we have enough resources to sustain ourselves. And what we're referring to is not like I'm sitting in the bunker, I have enough resources to outlast a nuclear war. It's actually a holistic self-sufficiency, meaning to be self-sufficient within the context of the greater whole. So when we saw this is happening, actually, it's a writing on a wall. It was bound to happen. And during the last 10, 15, actually 20 years in our group at Radiant Life Technologies, what we've been working towards is actually to building tools, technologies, our business and relationships towards self-sufficiency. In other words, what we've been working on is to find ways how help people help themselves. That's the definition of self-sufficiency. And since there are no shortcuts in this process, we need to start with ourselves, meaning our personal health. When I do this, let's say, coMra treatments for myself, my children, my parents, for Anna, her parents, then we extend this self-sufficiency to our clients, to Anna's clients in her medical practice. Then we extend it to our friends, friends of friends. And then this self-sufficiency needs to go out and extend more and more and more. So this is why we decided, rather than just writing Facebook posts and making videos, actually let's call everybody together and see what we can come up with to extend that self-sufficiency. Because actually the need for holistic medical technology is the greatest. I would say like never before. The need in a device like coMra has been so great. And this is happening today, right now, worldwide. I'll go into the details, but this is the bottom line, is that the whole civilization need tools for self-care at home. So in this webinar, we will go to telemedicine as a way how to reach out to the clients. I mean, it's not new, telemedicine. Obviously, it's been around for 10 years, maybe 20 years. But there's a difference because now we have a tool, coMra therapy specifically, which can empower the person with whom to whom we reach out and the practitioner, the doctor, who can use this tool. So very briefly about myself, I'm a director of research and development at RLT. I'm not a medical doctor. I am a scientist, a researcher, but I do have experience with medical business. About 3 years ago in Russia, with my friend, we opened a coMra medicine, coMra therapy center for restorative medicine. Big facility, 400 square meters, 12 people staff, and we ran it for 2 years. And actually it was a huge experience for me to run this organization. And this is how I met Dr. Anna. She came to work in our center eventually. But after working for 2 years in the center, I realized it was in my face, I need to write a book on coMra therapy. I need to tell about coMra therapy to many more people than I can reach just physically through the center. And at the same time, Anna also felt that there is a need to reach out to patients who cannot come to the city. They are in remote villages, they are in other cities, actually in other countries. So the need came up. It became obvious about 2 years ago that we need to somehow shift and expand. We need to multiply ourselves through the internet. So a year ago, we decided Anna decided to shift to telemedicine, and I stepped out of the business to write the book. So this is how our small history. So today, when we heard the news about the coronavirus, the first thing we did is we wrote a short article. How can you use coMra therapy to treat COVID-19? I hope you saw the article already. But also, it's not just that, for people who already have coMra at home, the opportunity is actually for the practitioner now to work in a new way. And the need is, well, first of all, is because our clients are sitting at home. And this is the time when they need you the most. Secondly, there is opportunity to reach out to people who normally would never consider, let's say, holistic, non-invasive, energy-based treatment. But now there is no drug against coronavirus, there is no vaccine, there is no tool available. So these people they're looking for it. And we'll share how it works with coMra therapy. Thirdly, if you're already using coMra therapy in your practice, you're already a holistic practitioner, because, you know, when you treat, let's say, diabetic retinopathy, you also treat diabetes. If you treat knee osteoarthritis, you also treat the whole system, the whole immune system. So you already have all the tools you need to use this in a new circumstance, in the context of the lockdown, everybody sitting at home. And finally, as a healthcare practitioner, as a doctor, obviously you are completely safe at home. There is no risk of transmission of the virus, of getting the virus, or actually, you know, transmitting it to other people. So in this regard, telemedicine and coMra therapy and the current situation is like ideal match. This is why we feel, you know, Garrett made a perfect, fantastic video about, like, this is the time, actually. We've been working for more than 10 years at RLT. We're building up to this moment, and now we can reach out. So if we're talking about the global challenge, the challenge is how we can treat COVID-19, what method, what tools we have. So the treatment must be effective. It must be at home, because I don't know how in your country, but for example, in Russia, if you start feeling symptoms, they tell you, no, don't come to the hospital. You must stay at home, whether your symptoms, you know, deal it on your own. Only if you have difficulty breathing, only like you're in a really tough situation, then you call ambulance. And only then you can come to the hospital. So the treatment must be done at home. And that's sort of one challenge that we have to address. And also it must be a low cost. I'm talking about not everybody, and not everybody should actually buy the breathing machine or loads of medication. So it should be affordable. So, and this is where the coMra therapy comes in. But before we go to the how coMra therapy works and why we believe coMra therapy is such a good tool for treating COVID-19, I want to look at the actual data. So I went to the WHO website. They maintain on a daily basis the latest research articles published worldwide from the doctors, from the researchers, from the field, who are reporting their clinical observations, who are reporting their findings. So I went there to the data, I downloaded the whole database about 10 days ago. There was 5,000 articles. So I started looking, okay, what about the immune system? How many scientists and doctors are concerned with the specifically immune system, because it's infection? To my surprise, when I did a search on the immune system, I found only 500 articles out of almost 5,000 who are at least mentioning the word immune system. It's very surprising to me. And then I start looking at the actual articles, you know, read a whole bunch of articles. So if we want to, you know, my three main conclusions, what clinical data tells us about COVID-19? First of all, the only certainty we have in identifying COVID-19 versus similar diseases is by detecting the unique sequences in virus RNA. It means that we need to run a specific test to identify, is this a COVID-19, this is the new coronavirus, or is it a disease with similar symptoms, like influenza? Secondly, from a clinical point of view, COVID-19 is characterized by a rapid development of immunosuppression. So COVID-19 is different from other viral infections and respiratory diseases by this rapid onset of immunosuppressed state within the first 7 to 10 days. And in case of pre-existing immunodeficiency, the disease progresses quite rapidly to the pneumonia, and then possibly to severe stage and then to the critical stage. So based on this data, based on our experience of coMra therapy, we believe, we're convinced that our main approach to prevent and treat COVID-19 is to support the immune system. This is the way forward, because vaccine will be late. Inevitably, it will be late. It will be developed at some point, but it will be late already. Many months will pass, many thousands of people will get infected. Secondly, we cannot solve the problem of COVID-19 by printing $1 trillion, because immunodeficiency is not dollar dependent. Next, immunodeficiency is a disease that cannot be solved by many more hospital beds or more doctors or more of the standard model of healthcare. Immunodeficiency is a state. This is how much our body has resources to fight the infection. So we need to look at in what way can we help the body to fight the infection. So first of all, let's look at this study published, I believe it's a week ago. When I downloaded it, it was like literally a few days ago. So why I looked at this study? This is an article written by doctors from Wuhan Hospital, where they studied 452 patients from January 10 to February 12, who were coming to, this is designated hospital for people who were confirmed COVID-19. So the main conclusion of that study, after studying 452 patients, was that the novel coronavirus might mainly act on lymphocytes, especially T lymphocytes. Later on, we'll send you the article. Please study the whole article. All the data is there. It's a very good statistics there. The symptoms, the clinical findings, all of it is there. So, but the main conclusion is these doctors found out is that the COVID-19 disease is acting mostly on the immune system. This is why the severity of the disease starts to progress. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail. Now, the second study I found also very interesting. Why the study is interesting is that because they compared patients who came to the clinic, to the emergency fever clinic, with symptoms like COVID-19. It was 163 adults. So upon admission, they did a battery of tests. They did the PCR test to establish if these symptoms were caused by coronavirus or is it other disease, seasonal influenza, bacterial pneumonia, but other diseases. So 60 patients from this group were confirmed they had the novel coronavirus. And then they compared how this group of patients confirmed COVID-19 is different from the second group of patients who had a different disease, let's say by influenza. And again, what they found out is that when they just compare statistically, there is a significantly higher proportion of dry cough, low count of immune cells, leukopenia, lymphopenia, meaning the low count of lymphocytes in the peripheral blood, and accelerated erythrocyte sedimentation rate. So what it means is that if we compare patients who come to the clinic and we study and we try to distinguish the two groups, is that people with COVID-19 are in a more immunosuppressed state. So I found these two articles very interesting because as a practitioner, as a doctor, I feel it's very important to look at the actual clinical data and not so much what CNN, BBC, Fox News saying on the topic. And what really sort of at the highlight is, just the last paper I want to show you, is this study from Peking, a group of scientists and doctors. They reviewed the whole data, the whole data set available from Wuhan, from other hospitals, and they proposed the hypothesis: what's the potential pathogenesis? What's the way how disease is developed? And I really like to show you this this picture. It's a very interesting picture. So I'll just take a highlighter. Okay. So what you're looking at is a timeline. It's a timeline of 3 phases in COVID-19 disease. The first phase is called viremia, means when we just get the virus, it starts rapidly multiplying, spreading with the bloodstream for the body. So this red line, which goes up, this one, this red line goes up. This is the rapid increase in this viremia phase of the virus throughout the body. Now, what they also observed is that there is a usually normal to slightly decreased amount of T lymphocytes. So this is the T lymphocytes. This is our immune defense. This is our secondary immune defense. So when the person is not immunodeficient, when the person generally younger, when there are no other conditions present. In other words, the person, when the person got the virus, she was not immunodeficient. So by the stage of, by the acute stage, there is slight dip and then recovery of number of T lymphocytes. And then we see, that's what we want to see. The number of virus particles in the body start to decrease. And then the person proceeds to recovery phase. What happens if there's a different picture? Now, this is the person who, so we can see here, same progression, more or less. But then in the acute pneumonia phase, if the person is older, if the person has diabetes, high blood pressure, other chronic diseases, suddenly we see drop of the T cells, of the T lymphocytes. This is our immune system. We see rise of inflammatory factors, and we see high level of viral nucleic acid. So at this point, at the acute phase, the immune system pretty much shuts down, and the person proceeds to the severe phase and then to the critical phase. So the doctors and scientists who wrote this article, I mean, the hypothesis, is that if the person was, for some reason, in an immunodeficient state, then at this point, at this critical point, instead of the secondary immunity to kick in fight off the viral infection, we actually see exhaustion of our immunity. The immune cells, which are supposed to fight off the infection, start to, first of all, slow down. They functionally become inactive, and then they start massively to die off. So this is what we need to stop here. We need to take that line that goes down and actually put it back up. That's what we need to do. We need to give support to our immune cells in order for them to fight off coronavirus. Okay, go next slide. So if you think about now the big picture and why this coronavirus is making such effect on our society. It's not the first time the coronavirus is around, obviously. We've met it a few times before, but our conviction is that the current pandemic of COVID-19 is basically a reflection of global immunodeficiency. And immunodeficiency is developed why? We take too many antibiotics. There is a lack of physical exercise, our diet, the emotional stresses, and I will go why this is all happening. So what we need to tackle is the immunodeficiency and not so much the virus, because the virus will come back. For now, it will be coronavirus. In a few months, few years, it will be another virus. But the challenge is immunodeficiency. So what we can do right now? First of all, what anybody can do is stop leaking out our energy resources. I found this article very interesting. It was published in Nature 3 years ago. And the author tried to estimate how do we spend our energy. I mean, what kind of activities in our body, what's the total budget? That's a very good paper. So what you can see here, if we take energy expense of the person as 100%, average adult, average sedentary lifestyle. So inflammation, when our immune system is activated by some kind of pathogen, is a huge energy load on our body. Mild inflammation adds up 25% of energy expense on our body. If we go to the severe state, like sepsis, it's a severe immune challenge to our body. That's plus 60% of energy expense. Now, what 60%? Is it more? Is it less? Out of the 100. Remember that there are several functions in the body that we cannot get rid of. Oh, well, first of all, we lay down in the bed. Okay, so physical activity stopped. Secondly, we lose appetite. Why? Because digestion is actually very energy expensive. So we can cut down on some energy expenses, but not on the rest of it. We need to breathe, we need to maintain body temperature and so on. So when you think about sepsis, when you think about severe immune challenge, this is really energy expensive. And now think about a person who already has chronic infection, like for example, hepatitis C. That's extra 10% that the person has to feed all the time. So immune system was already busy dealing with hepatitis C infection. Now, if we feel acute pain, if we are in a very high distress due to pain, we can experience energy expense up to 60%. Chronic pain, 15%. Next, if we experience psychological stress, you see there, it adds up to extra 30%. But this is just only energy expense. If you think about how our body works, it's a very well-known fact. When the body is in a stress response mode, it shuts down immune system. The number of leukocytes is decreasing because the body is in a state of fight or flight.
Arzhan,
So, yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a question here, because I remember from this paper, to give some context for people, if I'm remembering correctly, let's say when we work, go through our day, get up in the morning, do all of our stuff in a day, that there accounts for about 10% in this, let's say, so having a chronic low-grade infection is like living 2 days in 1 day, to give context to those numbers. Do I remember that correctly?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to give some context, so, when we got acute pain, it's like 6 days on top of your full day that you're living in 1 day. That's why it's so exhausting and all these things. Just wanted to give that what a day constitutes in terms of energy expenditure being 10% for some more context for people. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, God. If we are stressed out, if we in panic, we overloaded with fear, and we can't sleep, obviously, that's extra 30%. Now, it's not exactly extra. The 30% comes up because we do not rest at night, so the body can recover. And as a result, we get that 30%. Anxiety, just nothing else, but only anxiety adds up plus 10%. So when you add here other chronic diseases like diabetes, like arthritis, autoimmune diseases, if diet is like really bad. So is it really surprising why we see people falling under with this coronavirus? Sometimes people say, oh, but it's not just old people, young people get sick too. Correct. And when I was discussing it with Anna, her days back in the hospital, when you run those shifts, when you work like crazy for 24 hours, you're stressed. You hugely emotionally, physically, mentally taxed. So it's not really surprising when a nurse, is 25 years old, she's young and strong, but because of day after day after day, seeing people dying around you creates that extra stress. That's when your immune system shuts down. That's when you get infected, even if you're young. So to be at peace is a requirement to be healthy. I found this message very powerful. We really need to bring it across, and science, data, really confirms it. Second thing, well, first of all, stop leakage of the energy reserves. Anybody can do it. Second, we can build up our functional reserves. So given all the previous things, obviously we cannot, treat the heal diabetes in 2 days or in 1 week. We cannot, get rid of being 60 years old, 70, 90. So despite all these factors that are sort of building up to the energy budget, we still can do a lot. And this is what coMra therapy does. Remember, there are non-invasive radiances, infrared laser, magnetic field, ultrasound, color LEDs. What they are doing, they are enhancing the ability of a cell to function. That's what it's doing, coMra therapy. And just as an illustration, I made this graph to show you. So what do I mean by this graph? Let's say this is our viral load. So in red, this is how much we got infected. But if we already immunodeficient and our reserves are quite low, and if we get infected with these reserves, at this level, then the disease will progress to pneumonia. It will progress to the severe stage. So our first task is to get from here up to here before we get infected. Ideally, this is our first prize. So we do a preventative treatment with coMra therapy. You can do it for 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, depending on your current condition. And after you finish that treatment with coMra therapy, the preventative treatment, boom, your functional reserves are top capacity. And when you get infected, I'm saying when, not if, because according to most projections that I heard on the internet, on the interviews, the fact is that chances are we all will get coronavirus, even with all the quarantine, with all the lockdowns. It is too late to trying to stop the spread. Meaning, we will get infected. My parents will get infected. My kids will get infected. So the first thing we did is get up your palm, get your delta, build up your functional reserves. So that's what we did with our families, our friends, co-workers. So this is what we need to do. And to support this, because we know that coMra therapy works. Anna here, she worked with pneumonia, with viral infections, with coMra therapy. She has this first-hand experience. Others people, not necessarily. So I also did some search and found some articles just to support the claim. It's not just what we say. Also, we can study the literature. I feel it's very important to say. So just for example, I found this article. It's published in 2002, almost 20 years ago. Here in Russia, low-level laser therapy and magnetic infrared laser therapy is actually a part of a standard of care. So, for example, when Anna was working in the hospital, when we first met, she was already using in her hospital low-level laser, magnetic field, microcurrent, ultrasound, color therapy. All of the toolbox is just all different devices. So the reason why I'm showing you a paper from 2002 is that, there is almost 40 years of experience, clinical experience of using these low-level radiances in medical practice. So in this particular paper, they looked at 62 patients with severe pneumonia. And they tried different techniques, methods to show which one works better. So the conclusion is that there was a positive effect of laser therapy on immunity. The number of T lymphocytes increased significantly. Their functional activity improved also. This is what we want. We want to apply laser therapy. We want to boost energy balance of our immune system. We want them running, doing their job. And second slide, I'll show you very briefly. This is a latest study from 2016, and I liked it because they measured the functional activity of neutrophils. Now, neutrophil is an immune cell. You can see here, it's scrolling around. I'll play it again. Neutrophil is an immune cell that its job is to kill virus and bacteria. So this one is crawling around very fast. I mean, you can see the timeline. And in green, it's a bacteria. So its job to roam around, identify the pathogen, and kill it, digest it, and actually kill it. So that's what we want from a healthy, normal neutrophil. So when they studied patients in this study, I believe it was 150 patients, if I'm mistaken, with pneumonia, they divided them in 3 groups: mild inflammation, moderate inflammation, and severe inflammation. And they looked at the activity, how active neutrophils in killing bacteria. And the 3 graphs you're seeing is the activity index, how active they are, how actively they are doing their job. In blue color, you see only antibiotics, the standard, what applied in the case. And in orange color, you see activity, antibiotics supplemented with low-level laser therapy. What they did, they applied laser device to the blood. It's called non-invasive blood irradiation. They did it for 7 days, once per day. So what we're seeing here is that in people who had only mild inflammation, there is practically no drop in activity. The green line, let me draw actually, so you see what I mean. So this green line here, this is the healthy. It's a 5.1, I believe. This is what we want, a healthy neutrophil doing its job. And in mild inflammation, there is no difference, either with antibiotics or antibiotics plus laser therapy. In moderate inflammation, it's a different story. The activity of neutrophils is reduced. It's all the way down here. That's the activity we're observing. It means that in moderate inflammation, the neutrophils are doing their job at half speed, if I'll use such an expression. they're not as effective in killing the pathogen. So what you see here, for example, this blue column is that even though when we give a patient antibiotic, the functional activity is not changed, which is to be expected. But when we also do non-invasive blood irradiation, we pretty much double the functional activity of neutrophils, almost up to the healthy state. And these patients, not surprisingly, recovered faster. The symptoms were less severe and the better outcomes. And the third group with the severe inflammation, again, you see the functional activity was even lower. With antibiotics, there was some improvement in functional activity. Perhaps this is related to the less bacterial load on the neutrophils because the antibiotics, but again, we see a much better improvement if we add low-level laser therapy. So I'm just adding this study so you can see that there is a most immediate, most direct effect. We can literally charge or boost activity of our immune cells. Well, in this study, it's neutrophils, and there are a whole bunch of other studies regarding T lymphocytes. I found about a dozen studies dedicated to T lymphocytes, but they are not in pneumonia. They are acute pancreatitis, they are in other types of infections. So I decided not to put them in this presentation because of just time. So let me clear this up.
And just to mention one thing for the moment, people might be wondering, well, why with the antibiotics? And because it's standard of care in Russia, they have to apply the antibiotics in order to be able to do it. Can't deviate from the standard of care to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. You have to do it in a hospital. Now, I've written a book, coMra Therapy Healing with Coherence, and we will send you the copy of this book after the webinar. It's a short read, 68 pages. I hope you like it. But all the key points are in this book regarding how coMra therapy works, how we can apply it in medicine.